What's up, YouTube? I'm Mike, and today I'm back finally outside again. Dude, it's been so long since it's been nice enough in our neighborhood to record videos while I'm walking around getting some sun on my old man body. So today what we are talking about is I'm going to give you guys an update on the no testosterone experiment that I've been running. For those of you who don't know, I stopped injecting testosterone about 3 weeks ago now, I think. I never know the exact dates on these videos because I just all of a sudden get an idea and go, oh, you know, I think I'll go shoot a video. And so then there's no preparation or anything that goes into them. So I stopped injecting testosterone and took my cycles. The current cycle that I'm running is 300 milligrams of Deca, 300, actually it's about 400 milligrams of Masteron, and I'm currently running 70 milligrams of Tren. So we've got Deca at 300 milligrams, Masteron E at 400 milligrams, and Trenbolone acetate at 10 milligrams a day. It took about, I don't know, from the time that I stopped injecting the testosterone, the reason that I did this is I've been struggling with estrogen, you know, forever. Like as long as I've been trying to do these cycle videos or these cycles, estrogen has just constantly plagued my cycles, and it took me a long time to get things dialed in. I had gotten myself set up in a situation where I knew exactly how much Arimidex I needed to treat, 200 milligrams of test. I knew exactly how much I needed to treat. Hopefully this mic boom is blocking that wind. 500 milligrams of test, but the second that I put any other aromatizable compound, especially Deca, into the mix, everything just goes berserk. And I turned into I had just an absolute estrogen bomb situation occur when I added Deca and then of course mint. So I hypothesized that bodybuilders the world around could possibly take control of their cycles by removing the aromatizable compounds or primarily testosterone, and controlling your estrogen with injectable estradiol. So that's what I've been doing. That's what I've been trying to accomplish anyway. I am very happy to report that this experiment is going still far better than I could have imagined. But I want to give you kind of an update on, you know, what it's been like thus far. So when I decided to go off testosterone, I was currently at that time taking 200 milligrams a week. And so very small amount, but due to the Deca in the mix, it was still requiring like 5 milligrams of 8X per week to control my estrogen. My estrogen I had knocked my estrogen all the way down to 20, I believe, when I was running 1 milligram of I was running 1 milligram of 8X per day when I was at 500 milligrams of test and 200 milligrams of Deca. When I decided to try to get control of that, I dropped the test down to 300 and then to 200, and during that period of time, I was able to get my 8X dose down to like 5 milligrams a week is what was required to keep my estrogen somewhat in the sweet spot. So during that period of time, I had a really nasty roller coaster ride where I had I had estrogen that had climbed all the way up to, I think, like 96 picograms during the mint experiment. And then I slowly knocked that down all the way into the sweet spot using 1 milligram of 8X per day, and then decided that I shouldn't need that amount. So I tapered the 8X dose back, and my E2 shot right back up to like 60 or something. So it was just a total disaster. And at that point I was convinced that I was completely done screwing around with my estrogen. So I pulled all the testosterone out, and it took a couple of weeks before all of my gyno symptoms subsided. So I had been having really bad gyno during the high estrogen situation caused, toward the end of the high estrogen situation caused by the mint cycle and Deca cycle I was running. The thing that was so inexplicable about the mint cycle was that when I had the super high E2 and crashed prolactin, When my prolactin was crashed and my E2 was stratospheric on the mint, I was not experiencing any gyno symptoms at all, which was one of the reasons why I didn't think that what I was experiencing was low estrogen. I was going back and forth with Kowalser saying, dude, like, I don't have any symptoms of high estrogen. I don't have water retention. I don't have, I'm not crying all the time. Like, in fact, my wife and I were convinced that I was experiencing the sides of low E2. And so I kept dosing cabergoline, trying to solve what I thought was low E2 high prolactin. And it ended up being the complete polar opposite, which is actually the point of this video. What I am now figuring out is that all of the symptoms that we experience, or most of the symptoms that we experience, I experience at least, from female hormones on steroid cycles, does not seem to be as cut and dry as I once thought. So earlier on in my experimentation, it seemed simple enough. If you don't take enough Arimidex with testosterone, for example, in your cycle, then you're going to get high E2, water balloon status, moon face, excessively crying and weepy and emotional and all of these things. And that was pretty much true in the early days when all I was using was testosterone. The second that I added the 19-nor drug into the mix, everything changed. And I started experiencing gyno that was unresolvable by using Arimidex. So I crashed my estrogen twice on 2 different 19-nor cycles and still had gyno, which is what I talked about in one of my previous videos, saying that prolactin is now been proven in my book to be the causal factor of gyno on cycle. So I linked a video where I showed the blood work that I had done, where my E2 was right in the sweet spot. It was 16 picograms per milliliter, I think. And my prolactin was also normal, but was like 8. I had a prolactin level of 8 in the range, 16 picograms per milliliter of E2 in the range, and yet I had raging, very, very visible, painful gyno. So I left my estrogen alone and did nothing other than start bringing my prolactin down with the use of cabergoline, and all of the gyno subsided. And so this is how I ran for over a year. I would use various doses of testosterone, Masteron, Trenbolone, and anytime I started to get the painful gyno lumps, I would increase the cabergoline dose, and the gyno would go away. I had no depression problems. I had no psychological problems. Everything was dialed into the sweet spot. Then I started fucking around with Deca, and everything changed. And when I crashed my prolactin into the toilet, that seems to have been the causal factor in what made my body behave as if one state of affairs was true when it was actually the polar opposite. So I got my E2 to come all the way down by overdosing on Arimidex and then taking the testosterone completely out of my cycle. So I had about a week of good days. I had high E2, and the E2 came into the normal range, and I was feeling pretty good. And then it kept transitioning through the normal range, and I was still feeling good. And I got completely off the Arimidex, and I had like a week period of time where I was requiring 0 Arimidex, and I was having no gyno, no estrogen problem, no estrogen side effects at all. Around about a week into this experiment, I started feeling very depressed, very lethargic, very disconnected from my wife. So I said, okay, my E2 is now low, and I am experiencing the side effects of low E2. So I injected 0.2 milligrams of estradiol valerate, and most of the psychological symptoms began to resolve within the first 24 hours. After the first 24-hour mark, however, the gyno that had been completely non-existent when my estrogen was low or felt low started to reoccur. it came on in kind of a weird way. So I injected the estrogen, and I would say within the first 12 hours, I noticed nipple sensitivity. And then by the 24-hour mark, I noticed what felt like just full-blown gyno. And then by the 48-hour mark, the pain, the tenderness to the mass in my right nipple was back. And so that freaked me out, and it made me think, oh shit, you know, I took too much estrogen, I just shot my estrogen back up too high. Meanwhile, I was having no side effects of high estrogen. I still had the lethargy. I still had the complete and total disconnection from my wife. Absolutely no. I mean, you couldn't squeeze a tear out of me if you tried. Sex was just absolutely emotionally vacant. No signs of low estrogen, but there's this gyno problem. And so I panicked and I pulled the plug on the E2. And so I was planning on pinning E2 every 3 days, and by day 4, I was starting to feel low again. So I was like, well, shit, what am I gonna do? You know, I've got this gyno, and I feel like crap. I have no connection to my wife. I really think that my estrogen is low, but I don't want the gyno to come back. So I decided, well, let's try a smaller dose. So I cut the dose in half, and I pinned 0.1 milligrams of estradiol valerate, 4 days post-injection of 0.2 milligrams. And strangely enough, the gyno symptoms started to resolve. It was bizarre. I pinned more estrogen, and the gyno symptoms started to resolve for the first 24 hours. And then, I guess the 48-hour mark, I started to feel nipple sensitivity again and crushing, crippling depression. Crushing. Like, I went into a state where I just could not, everything, I was so dysphoric, I was so disconnected. I made several videos about this. Things in my marriage were horrific. My wife was tolerating it, but she was just like a stranger to me. I just could not connect with her at all. And so I wanted to take cabergoline, but I knew my prolactin was low, or at a minimum, it was back within the reference range, but at the very low end of the reference range. And so I kept saying, it can't be prolactin. It's got to be E2. So I'm just gonna stay the course. And 2 days later, I decided to pin another 0.1 milligrams of estradiol. And after I pinned the estradiol, my gyno symptoms started to slowly resolve again. What the hell's going on? 2 days later, 48 hours after my second, what I think was now second 0.1 milligram injection of estradiol valerate, the crushing depression had gotten worse to the point where I didn't want to get out of bed. I didn't want to go to work. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I wasn't playing video games. I wasn't watching TV. I was just completely and totally useless. And my wife was like, Mike, like, we've been here before. You have warned me in the past that if you get this way, to remind you that cabergoline helps. She's like, what do you think about that? And I said, babe, at this point, I'll do anything. I'll do anything because this is miserable. And while my prolactin level was coming up out of the absolute toilet, it was not causing me any D-game problems at all. You know, once I started getting the estrogen to come down, my D-game returned. And so I had fully functional D-game when my prolactin was 0.3, 1, 1.3, 1.9, like basically the entire time that prolactin was in the toilet, it wasn't causing me any side effects. I made several videos saying, you know, if not for the problems that I've been having, I would just be like this all the time. I'm happy. I'm not depressed. I have no Deca. I don't have any of these issues that usually come with higher prolactin levels. But the high estrogen was obviously causing a massive, massive problem. So she says, what about the caber? And I'm just like, you know what? Fuck it, you know? Like, what's the worst that could happen? Worst thing, you know, I'll take it, and it will either not do anything for my mood or my gyno. It'll knock my prolactin down a little bit. One dose, not the end of the world, because that's the thing. The thing about the caber is every single time I've ever dosed it for this problem, which was either painful gyno or crushing depression, it works super fast. Like within the first day of ingesting it, I was already starting to feel better. Within 24 hours, a brand new man. So I went to the bathroom about 11:30 in the morning one morning, and I took a 1/4 milligram of cabergoline. And within 6 hours, my wife was like, what the hell? What the hell? Where has this guy been? And I said, baby, my nipples are almost complete. My gyno's almost completely gone. I talked about this in the previous video. How could that possibly be true? How could 6 hours post-injection of 1/4 milligram of cabergoline cause these types of effects so rapidly? It would be one thing, again, if it was just my mood that changed. And I know I said this before, but for your nipples to physically reduce in size and sensitivity in 6 hours, that's not placebo. There's no placebo in the world that does that. And so I took the cabergoline and things started to get better until they weren't. And here's the second part of the story. So I take a 1/4 milligram of cabergoline, and at this point, I'm not noticing the connection between the estradiol injections. I haven't yet figured out that there's something funny going on with these estradiol injections. So I take the cabergoline, 24 hours later, I feel way better. My gyno is completely gone. I can't even feel the lumps. But 48 hours post-ingestion of cabergoline, the gyno is starting to come back again. It's like, what in the hell is going on? So now I feel good. D game is still working great. I'm getting closer and closer to my wife because now we're like day 6 on E. So I'm starting to feel the effects of the estrogen coming up. And for the first time in weeks, this is when I made that video saying, man, this has been game changing. Like, I have been a complete and total useless zombie in my house. I have been totally disconnected from my wife. I've been totally disconnected from my family. And the cabergoline has made a substantial difference. The reality though is that we had two things occurring at the same time. We've got E2 that's coming up out of the toilet, which, you know, obviously is gonna make you feel better. And then you've got cabergoline offsetting what I know is prolactin-induced side effects. So, but the thing that was causing me the continuous ongoing problem is that while I continue to pin the estradiol and I feel good, I've got this transient coming and going, this gyno that just keeps coming and going. So I told my wife, look, I'm not gonna just keep pounding cabergoline unless I don't feel good. So I took cabergoline, I think on a Tuesday, and by the following Friday, I was on the cliff again. I could feel it. I could feel it, like nothing was good. Everything was starting to get dark and grim again. I told my wife, I said, dude, I don't care. I'm dosing it again. So I took a second dose of cabergoline, I think on Friday, and took it kind of late in the afternoon, late in the evening, I mean, and by the following morning, all the doom and gloom and depression was gone. And so was the gyno. And so I thought, okay, well, clearly the cabergoline is controlling the gyno, until it wasn't. Because then the next day, after I had ingested the cabergoline, the gyno came back, and it was really pretty sensitive. And so I'm looking at my body in the mirror, I'm talking to my wife. We're trying to sort all this out because I have no symptoms of high estrogen other than the gyno. I have zero. We've been watching 1883, which is a spinoff of Yellowstone. I don't know if y'all have seen this. This is about one of the most depressing shows you could possibly see. I am usually a huge crybaby and a half when I'm watching shows like this with my wife, especially if it has anything to do with a man and his daughter. Now, I'm not gonna spoil the show for you if you've never seen it and you plan on watching it. But normal me would have been a ball of tears through a lot of this show. And I could not connect with it at all. And so I'm trying to figure out, why is it that I have no emotionality and gyno? And so I began to track my estrogen injections and my side effects and uncovered a very bizarre, very bizarre behavior that I'm still yet to understand, although I have a hypothesis. I noticed that the gyno flare-ups get increasingly worse as we move away from the injection of estradiol. So like last night, I have not had any cabergoline since Friday. But yesterday, I injected 0.1 milligrams of estradiol valerate. When I injected it, I felt like I was making a huge error because my gyno flare-up was really quite painful. It was really uncomfortable. It's not visible, but it's under there. I can feel it underneath my nipple. The gland that's there is very painful. And so taking more estrogen on top of something that I could be misdiagnosing again seems like a really bad idea. But I told my wife, I was like, look, you know, I've just got to stick to it. I can't change the doses now because I want to go get my blood work done on Monday or Tuesday. And I need to have as stable of an injection history as possible. So for the past like week and a half, I have been injecting estradiol every 2 days. And so last night, late in the evening, which actually would become 2.5 days. That's one of the agreements that I made with myself is if you move it to 2.5 days, it brings the total peak down a couple of picograms. Maybe that'll be enough to get under the curve if that's what's really going on. And so I injected estradiol valerate last night around 8 o'clock or so in the evening. And I woke up this morning and the gyno was gone again. No cabergoline dose, addition of estradiol valerate, and the gyno is gone. Except last night, I couldn't finish during adult activity. I did eventually, but it took a lot. And there was a lot of problems going on there, which is consistent with prolactin issues. This is typically why people take cabergoline if they're running Trenbolone cycles, is because on 19 NOR cycles, you get to the point eventually where you can't finish, or it takes a really long time, or it takes, you know, a whole bunch of theatrics to get it done. And so here we have multiple examples of where I've got, in the absence of cabergoline, I have crushing depression, painful gyno, and trouble finishing. And then when I take the cabergoline, the depression goes away. Sometimes the gyno goes away. And as of yet, I haven't had these finishing problems. So again, the water is very muddy here, but the hypothesis that I'm currently developing is that the reason none of this seems cut and dry, like why, you know, everybody's talking about, well, there's no evidence of this, or there's no evidence of that. I already explained in my previous video that the evidence, for me at least, is clear that when I have E2 in the normal reference range and prolactin that is anything above like 2, I get gyno and Deca D and depression. When I have normal estrogen and low prolactin, that seems to be the sweet spot. And what appears to be going on in my cycle right now is that every time I develop symptoms, whether it be depression, lethargy, especially gyno, it seems to come when the ratio of prolactin to estrogen, and maybe even progesterone, because I have actually tested high for progesterone in the past. I've never had a prolactin test that was out of the range, but I have had a progesterone test that was out of the range. So that's one of the other things that I've been trying to experiment with. There are some drugs, I've made a video about this in the past, mifepristone, which is RU486, also known as the morning after pill, is a drug that will lower progesterone levels. Now, I live in the state of Texas, and even my overseas sources do not have this drug. I would love to guinea pig what would happen if a male takes mifepristone to knock his progesterone down. That actually could be the holy grail of running 19 NOR drugs, because it is distinctly possible that is the progesterone that's leading to the prolactin problem, that's leading to everything else, and that cabergoline is kind of a, you know, an ugly fucking spiderwebs, an ugly patch, because cabergoline not only lowers your prolactin level, but it lowers your progesterone levels to some degree. It lowers progesterone slightly less than prolactin. So it's very possible that I'm kind of using a dumb fix for a problem. If the problem is actually my progesterone level, which I'm also about to get checked. My wife signed off on me getting a whole bunch of blood work, so I'm probably gonna get prolactin, E2, and progesterone possibly tomorrow. But I wanted to put this data out there. I wanted to put my hypothesis out there before I go get it tested. Because obviously if my blood work is completely different than I think tomorrow, then that's gonna change the way I feel, and I don't want that to. I want to be transparent up front as to what I think is going on, and then we'll find out if the blood work actually proves it out. So what I'm expecting is the possibility of high progesterone. I think my prolactin, now that I've had a couple of doses of cabergoline, is back in the low end of the range, and I'm hoping against hope that my E2 is normal. If my E2 is normal, my progesterone is high, and my prolactin is there, you know, the reasonable amount, then we will be back to the condition that historically has worked well for me, which is keeping my E2 low, or keeping my E2 normal, and then anytime I have symptoms of depression, gyno, or trouble finishing, then what I have to tweak is my cabergoline dose. When I was on nothing more than 50 milligrams of Trenbolone per week, I was taking a 1/4 milligram of cabergoline twice a week. I'm now on 300 milligrams of Deca and 50 milligrams of Tren, and I'm still taking a 1/4 milligram twice a week because I'm afraid of crashing in the toilet again. I think what we're gonna find out is that all of my problems would be resolved by increasing my cabergoline dose to a minimum of 0.75 milligrams per week, something like a 1/4 every other day. I think that's gonna be the minimum amount necessary to control the 19 NORs that are in my system right now. So assuming that my estradiol experiment works out, and I actually succeeded in dialing my E2 right into the range with this set of protocols, with this protocol, then I will know that the gyno is not being caused by high E2. That's what I have to find out first and foremost. If my E2 is in the normal end of the range, then we're in the money again. It's back to heaven. Because then all I have to do is tinker with my cabergoline dose, and that is very rapid acting. So I never have to worry about spending any amount of time in some kind of crushing, miserable state, because within 6 hours of ingestion, I'm gonna be all the way back to normal or close to it. So what I'm hoping to find out tomorrow is that E2 is normal, and I really honestly don't care about the other two numbers. That's the thing. I'm not gonna keep treating prolactin on paper. If E2 is normal and I still have gyno sensitivity, which right now I do not, if it comes back, then the solution is going to be cabergoline to resolve it. It has worked for over almost 2 years historically. I've had no problems with this. It has been a godsend for me. It's why I've made so many videos singing the praises of cabergoline as being Trenbolone's wingman, 19 NOR wingman. I just don't think you can run a cycle without it, and I think that I am in the final days of proving it. But we have the dreaded E2 devil hanging over our shoulders. If my E2 comes back high again, in any amount, and I mean any amount, if I am 50 picograms in a range of 42, no dice, no dice. It's got to be in the 20s to 30 at a maximum. So if it comes back high, then I'm gonna have a little bit of an issue. I'm gonna have to, I'll probably try dialing the 0.1 milligram injections back to every 3 to 3.5 days, see what happens. That's more peaky than I would love. I really kind of like the flatness of the every other day, but we'll find out. As soon as I get the E2 number, that is what will put everything else into perspective. So there you have it. It's getting very hot out here now. I've had enough sun, and I'm almost at my 30-minute marker, so I'm gonna cut this video short. As always, thank you for watching. We'll see you on the next one.